Good morning, everybody. It's June 4th, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I want to thank everybody that's online today and all the presenters that presented the racks throughout the state and stuff like that. We'll start out this morning with a roll call. I'm going to start with the board first and then go to the racks. So I'm going to start Kevin Albrecht.
Here.
Randy Dirth.
Here.
Carl Hurst.
Here.
Wade Heaton.
Here.
Brett Selman.
Here.
Donnie Hunter.
Here.
The board is all present. I'll start with the rack roll call. The Northern Region, Justin Oliver.
Here.
Central Region, Brock McMillan.
Here.
Southern Region, Braden Richmond.
Here.
Southeast Region, Tricia Heding.
Here.
Northeast Region, Brett Prevadale.
Here.
Board and rack are all present. We have all of the DWR presenters online this morning. If there's any questions throughout the meeting as we go along, and there are several other people from all the regions that are available to answer any questions that the board or the RAC might have. I'd like to call for the approval of today's agenda. The motion.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second by Donnie and Wade. All those in favor, start the roll call again. Kevin Albrecht.
Yes.
Randy Dirth.
Yes.
Carl Hurst.
Yes.
Wade Heaton.
Yes.
Brett Selman.
Yes.
Donnie Hunter.
Yes.
Director, it's your time to give us the agency update.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things going on. So I guess I want to start off with a COVID-19 update. We currently don't have any employees who are quarantined or have tested positive. At this point, we're continuing to avoid that, so that's a good thing. We continue to work mostly in the field and out of our homes because of the virus. Our office is still under orange, so I'm doing this meeting from home today. But we're continuing to get things done in the field, and it's pretty amazing how resilient the employees have been out there and the great work they're getting done under these adverse conditions. So kudos to them. I'll say that right up front. Let's start with the habitat section. We had the sportsman's group stepped up at our annual meeting and contributed or allocated $3.2 million for habitat work. Through WRI, through the Watershed Restoration Initiative, and that is being leveraged into $26.2 million in projects this year, which is up from $25 million last year. So even with the COVID and all the stuff that's going on, we're continuing to hit the ground with great projects in the habitat section and get great work done there. The habitat section is working on a DWR water plan that will prioritize our efforts moving into the future to secure water for wildlife into the future. We have several land projects in the works. We're working on an acquisition near Salt Creek that will help firm up those boundaries on our WMA up there. Working on a condor easement down on the Zion unit, which will help the California Condor project down there. And we're looking to expand slightly the Red Desert Reserve in Washington County. Switching to aquatics. Our aquatics section, the hatchery portion was able to successfully raise sterile walleye for the first time for stocking in Red Fleet Reservoir. They reached a length of 2 inches, which increases their viability and put them into the lake. So that's a huge plus, and looking to do more of that moving forward. Working on developing a brood stock for bluehead sucker, which is a sensitive species in the Weber River. Fish populations are way up. So 2 good water years in a row have really helped. So get out and go fishing. It's really good right now. And I'll talk more about what's going on with usage and license sales here in a minute. For the outreach section, the one update I wanted to mention is Mark Martinez is the new permanent section chief, taking Robin Goodman's place. He interviewed and was awarded that job a couple weeks ago. So he's been doing that career mobility now for about 7 months. So we're happy to have Mark permanent in there. He's doing a great job. Licensing, resident sales across the board are way up. Antlerless applications are up. Turkey permit sales were way up. So people want to get out and they want to recreate. And people are buying fishing and hunting licenses. The one downside is non-resident licenses obviously are down because people can't travel here. And so the revenue is maintaining and slightly up, which is good. It's better than us not having that revenue coming in. So we're in good shape. Law enforcement, even with these challenging times, we've been able to ramp up our AIS efforts around Lake Powell and statewide. We've already checked 10,000 boats in the last few weeks. So we're doing, we got that program up and protecting the rest of the state from invasive species, aquatic species. Our law enforcement section continue to assist other agencies, sister agencies like Parks and Recreation, county agencies, with the increased use out in the people getting out and recreating. It's increased our need to help and assist in search and rescue and crowd control and all kinds of stuff. So they're doing a great job helping other agencies. We have 8 new officers we've hired that are going to be hitting their districts shortly after they get done with their training. And am I getting an echo there? Anyway, lots of recreation going on, and our officers are really busy. Wildlife, we had a confirmed livestock kill by a wolf in Rich County. Wildlife Services is currently trying to trap that wolf. I've not heard an update this morning as to how successful they've been. Sage grouse numbers our lek counts are almost done, and it looks like our populations are holding their own. Some units are up, some units are down. But the good news is the sheeprock sage grouse management area was up 50%, so we probably won't need to do supplemental transplants to that area this year. Sharp-tailed grouse numbers continue to increase since 2017, so we have good numbers out there. They're growing. Looking to put GPS radio collars on sandhills to learn more about which birds are migratory, which birds are resident, and get a little better picture of their movement patterns. We're not planning on trapping chukars this year because the dry spring is likely to have adversely affected brood success, so we're not going to trap. Overwinter deer survival statewide was up on all units, but sad to say the fawn survival on the cache is low and still remains low. Bookcliff's elk and deer neonate study is going strong. 33 calves have been captured already. The pregnancy rate this year was 87% compared to 53% last year. The fawns on the Bookcliffs just started dropping. We've caught 4 so far, and the pregnancy rate on the deer are 98% this year, so that's good. We're closely monitoring the new sheep populations on the Minerals and the Antelope Island population, and lamb production looks good. So I know that's a whole lot, but that's all I've got. If anybody's got any questions.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the RAC chairs? Mike, thank you for that update. That's very encouraging to hear that we're doing really good so far with the conditions that we're dealt with. I need to get a motion to pass the past minutes of our last meeting. I accept the motion to approve those minutes.
This is Randy. I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I'll do a roll call. Kevin Albrecht,
Yes.
Randy Dirth,
Yes.
Carl Hurst,
Yes.
Wade Heaton,
Yes.
Brett Selman,
Yes.
Donnie Hunter. Our first agenda item today is going to be the Book Cliffs Working Group update by Miles Hanberg from the Northeast region. Miles, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, you all can see a presentation screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for everyone for the opportunity to give you guys an update on what's been going on out in the Book Cliffs. This spring, our Book Cliff Working Group finalized a action plan of some strategies and things that the group would like to work on to improve things in the Book Cliffs, especially when it comes to our deer and elk populations. So in this presentation, I'll talk to you a little bit about why the group was formed, what things led up to that, some of the data and evidence that the group has looked at, and then finally talk about some of the strategies and actions that the group has identified to move forward with. So with that, over the past decade in the Book Cliffs, it seems like our big game populations have been struggling out there a little bit. We've had somewhat of a decreasing trend in our deer numbers over the past decade. The elk population out there just doesn't seem to grow as much as we would expect. It's not comparable to some of the other units where we really have to be sometimes aggressive with harvest to keep those populations within our objectives. But we notice over the years that our cow calf and our doe fawn ratios are often a little bit low coming into the winter than what we would like to see. In some previous efforts as well, we noticed that there was maybe some higher than normal adult doe deer mortality as well. So those are all things that were a little bit concerning to people over the last decade. We've kind of noticed that. But moving forward into 2017, when the Book Cliffs was identified as a unit for the Wildlife Migration Initiative, we started capturing deer in that fall of 2017. And what we noticed in the fall is that the deer body fat, the ingested free body fat, was about 7.56%, which is really lower than what you'd really want to see out there. So this is one of the things that really spurred a lot more concern in the Book Cliffs. What's going on? Why are these animals coming off the summer range to winter range in poor condition? So that's a bit of a concern. Just to follow up, in 2018, that body fat rate was down to 6.35%. I think that was the second lowest that year in the state, only to the San Juan. But of course, 2018 was a record-setting drought year throughout Utah, but it was especially harsh out in the Book Cliffs. Fortunately, in 2019, those body condition responded up to 8.8. That's still a little bit lower than we really want to see, but we have to keep in mind Book Cliffs is a pretty arid, dry unit, so it may not be completely comparable to some of our other more productive units in the state. But so really, these are things that were alarming to us and alarming to many people. So in the November of 2018 board meeting, the Wildlife Board asked DWR to look into some of these reasons surrounding mule deer and elk populations in the Book Cliffs. What was really going on out there? Why are we seeing these things? And so in the Northeast region, we decided to form a working group to help determine the issues that are out there and help identify some of the strategies and actions that we can do to try to improve things in the Book Cliffs. That group started meeting in April of 2019 and met about every 2 to 3 months until earlier this spring. And we completed this action plan. Now, I assume you all had a chance to look through the action plan in the board packet. So this format will kind of go over some of the things that's in that plan, and there'll be a little bit of an abbreviated discussion, at least today. So anyhow, so the working group, we reached out to a wide variety of folks and interests. We really wanted to bring everybody along in this process, including ranchers, sportsmen's groups, land management agencies, really make sure we can build a good team and a coalition out there to try to move everybody forward and get the best product we can. So we did have those. A number of land management agencies, sportsmen's groups. We did have members from both the Northeastern Region RAC and the Southeast Region RAC on this committee. And so it was really a pretty good membership, and I think everybody felt pretty good with the product that we've come up with. So just more data to talk about what we were looking at. As part of the BYU Neonate study, we started capturing elk in 2019. This would have been in the spring to install the vaginal implant transmitters. At that time, when their elk are captured, you make an attempt to age them and look at the pregnancy rates of those. And so what was a bit alarming in 2019 is that this population is skewed towards older age animals quite significantly. In addition, in 2019, in the spring, there was only 50% of the elk were captured were pregnant. And that was a big red flag. So as Director Fowlks mentioned earlier, fortunately, those pregnancy rates responded and rebounded in 2020 to 87%. So things are looking better out there, and certainly that drought probably played a big role in what the pregnancy rates were. But really, this older age structure of cow elk in the Book Cliffs is something that's a little bit puzzling, a little bit concerning. Talk a little bit about the BYU Neonate study. It's a 2-year study. It began in 2019. Again, doe deer and cow elk are captured, and a vaginal implant transmitter are inserted into those individuals. And once the animal gives birth, the transmitter syncs up with the collar of the female, and that birth event is made known to the researchers, where they can go out and capture those newborn animals as soon as possible. A collar is placed on those, and they're monitored throughout the summer to determine survival rates. So you guys have probably seen a little bit of this data before as it's coming out, but in 2019, there were 50 mule deer fawns captured. 16 of those fawns survived until December 1st, and the mortality rates was classified mainly at cougar and bear. There were some unknown predation events, but mostly cougars and bears were responsible for those predation events on mule deer fawns. Same thing with Caf Elk. There were only 22 calves captured, largely because we had such a low pregnancy rate in our cow elk. 12 of those survived until December 1st. And again, the major mortality was attributed to cougars in the Caf Elk. So those were things that are a little bit concerning to us. Certainly this year will hopefully provide some more insight. As Director Fowlks mentioned, there's already been a number of Caf Elk captured, and the fawn deer captures is just beginning now. So this year will be some interesting data to see what comes from that. So horses are a thing that comes up whenever you talk about the Book Cliffs and when you talk about range conditions. The problem is we didn't really know how many horses were out there to be exact. And so DWR partnered with Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife, as well as State Institutional Trust Lands Administration, to complete a survey of horses in the Book Cliffs. That survey was completed in August of 2019. The map's a little bit tough to see. There's some blue lines that indicate what our flight path was out there, but we've mainly focused on summer range. And the reason why is, as I mentioned before, these animals are coming off of summer range in poor condition rather than necessarily dying throughout the winter. Really, the summer range seemed to be indicating that's where the problem may be. We did survey some adjacent areas, but what we found is in this crucial deer summer range and deer and elk summer range, there was 197 stray horses. Now, these are just stray horses. They're not wild horses. They're not protected or any designation that way. But as you can see on the map, there's a pink polygon that indicates the BLM's Wild Winter Ridge horse area. Those are wild horses. There were 236 horses in that. But within just a few miles of that summer range area, there were another 44 horses. So we did look at some other areas. We counted 603 total horses. If we would have surveyed some of that lower country, we certainly would have found a whole lot more, but we were really trying to focus on some of our deer and elk habitats towards the summer range. With these numbers, there's not a citability correction with those numbers. You know, with our deer and elk or elk surveys, we usually figure, you know, maybe somewhere around 70 to 80% citability. And I think something similar with horses would be applicable as well. So a lot of horses out there. So, you know, one of the questions at the board meeting back in 2018 is, are there too many mouths to feed in the Book Cliffs? And so a big portion of the working group's participation was to really try to evaluate that. And we did that by compiling all the demands, the forage demands for the Book Cliffs out there. That included our permitted livestock, the stray horses, as well as wildlife. And so we came up with a pretty good estimate of what the demands are of the available forage in the Book Cliffs. So we also used the NRCS web soil survey maps to evaluate the potential forage production. With those soil maps, it gives you an indication of how many pounds of forage could be produced on those sites in both favorable or good precipitation years, but also in unfavorable precipitation years. And so we looked at that to try to balance the demands and the potential production out in the Book Cliffs. So what we found is across the entire summer range, we're pretty close in balance overall with the amount of forage versus the demand. But we also recognize there's some areas that probably didn't have as much utilization, and some other areas that we've recognized probably had more significant utilization. So we kind of analyzed this down in a narrower area in this Seep Ridge, the U-Tribe boundary focus area, excluding the roadless area. And so one of the reasons why is this is the area that we see most of the stray horses. And it's also an area where the bison spend a fair amount of time. And there were some questions of whether or not bison were having an impact on our rangelands. So just in this narrow focus area, on a favorable, good precipitation year, it could produce up to 12,212 AUMs of forage. On a dry, poor year, its potential is closer to 8,800 AUMs available. So the demand that we calculated was about 12,000 AUMs. So what that's indicating is on a normal year, we're probably squeaking by, but on these dry years, we're out. We've got probably too many mouths to feed in this focus area. So we also looked by species of where these forage or these AUM demands were coming from. And so in the table, you know, elk is probably, it's one of the higher forage demands. Deer is pretty negligible. And really what was interesting to see is bison is really pretty insignificant in the total amount of forage demand in this area. The objective for bison in the Book Cliffs is 450 individuals. Not all of them stay in this area. And so it was pretty insignificant in the overall picture. Our permitted cattle was about 26% of the total demand. And at the bottom, these stray horses equal to about 36% of the total AUM demand. So if we go back to this previous slide and take away that 4,000 AUMs the horses are demanding, that puts us on a dry year closer to being, in balance out there. So horses are an issue. This is kind of the calculation spreadsheet that we use to calculate this. It's kind of a lot of information, but we looked at these populations and figured out what percentage of time is the population spending in this area, and then what percentage of the population are spending their time, the total population spending time in this area. And we did that utilizing some of the GPS technology with our wildlife species. And so this is an activity that the working group did collectively and together and came to agreement on. And so it's the best way we could come up with to really get a good idea of how much time and how much use by our wildlife species were going on in these areas. So, but I think it worked out pretty well. This is, a pretty high level view of usage out there. It's not really meant to be detailed, just give us a good overall picture of what's going on. The other thing that was discussed is the Sea Bridge Road that was paved back in 2010 to 2013. There were 6 crossing structures installed during that time, but the fencing was never ever installed along this section of the road. So, before paving, roadkills were very rare. As you see through the years, we got up to around 25 deer roadkills. But the key point with this is that, our traffic volumes haven't changed significantly. The road dead ends, at least the pavement does, at the Grand and Uena County line. But if the road is connected in the future to I-70, the traffic volumes increase, we'd expect these numbers to spike. So anyhow, this kind of gives you a visual indication of what's going on with roadkills, but it's increased dramatically compared to what it was. Is 25 deer a year a problem? That could be debated. So as we took all those data points into consideration, we started to identify priority issues and strategies. And so to address the forage deficiency, stray horses quickly came to the top of priorities. And so the strategies are to try to work with partners to get a gather completed on the summer range, especially to relieve that pressure, and then also to find ways to manage these horses in the future through construction of water traps and other things. So if any of these individuals come back, we can trap them before they become a problem. So that was a strategy that came to the top. I mentioned the BLM wild horse area. The BLM hasn't done a survey out there for a number of years. We need to make sure that the horses are managed according to the available AUMs, and then try to find some ways that we could get a gather completed on that horse area to bring those numbers down in accordance with what their allocated AUMs are. In some of the adjacent areas, there's a large blocks of sitla land, and these BLM horses do spend time on those properties, and so part of the solution was to find ways to remove some of those horses off of these sitla and private lands to help free up those allotments for permitted cattle grazing that's authorized there. Cattle distribution and usage, that was another topic we talked about. Really, there hadn't been probably the level of communication between all the parties in the past is what really would be desirable. And so one of the main goals is to increase the communication amongst everybody. And one of the ways to do that is to have all the players together at the annual operating meetings, go out and do joint monitoring together, but also, to help identify what are the ideal grazing scenarios for an individual allotment, and what are the bottlenecks, or what are the roadblocks that are keeping us from getting to that, and then how do wildlife play into those discussions as well. So those were some of the solutions that the group agreed to with cattle distribution and usage to help hopefully better manage our grazing out there. Water availability was a big topic, and I think a lot of our challenges that we face with grazing and other things, even wildlife populations, is the amount of water that's in the Book Cliffs. And so the priority for the group is to develop a 5-year plan of water development so we can really get our animals better distributed on the landscape. Vegetation treatments, we've done a ton of that out there, but I think at this point the group said, let's try to focus on these summer range areas and to help with those deficiencies that we experience up there. So again, a 5-year development of a 5-year plan for vegetation treatments was identified. So as we move into the deer herd health, that was another major priority issue. We'd like to continue to evaluate body conditions as time and budget allows. Those things can be costly to capture these individuals, but I think it's a very good data point to help us indicate where we're at with our habitat management. With predation, we will, the group agreed that we should implement the revised predator management policy that DWR's just completed. And, where practical, we'd like to continue to monitor predation rates just to see where we're at, determine if our management efforts are successful. Seepage Road, we need to continue to monitor that roadkill situation, work with partners to fence some of those hotspot areas, and really try to work with project proponents in the future to develop appropriate mitigation strategies if that road is extended sometime in the future on seepage. With our elk herd, the pregnancy rates, we need to continue to try to monitor those. I think the data looks a lot more favorable from this spring of 2020 capture, but we need to keep an eye on that to see what's going on. Again, that's going to be as time and budget allows. But at the last board meeting, we talked about the possibility of lowering some of these age structures in cow elk through antlers harvest. And so we need to explore the possibility of doing that. I think with the tooth data collection from the harvested cows that we permitted this year, for this fall, I think that'll help give us some insight into that in the future as well. So we'll take a look at that. We need to continue to look at predation and really try to keep an eye on that age and pregnancy rates in that population. The bison herd, bison can be controversial, but we'll continue to use hunting as a tool to distribute these bison across the landscape. When they do congregate in areas, that's when people become a little bit more agitated or upset. We'll continue to do more vegetation and water development to help distribute them. But then we also need to keep an eye on how those things are moving and with GPS colored telemetry. And then continue to use hunting as a management tool. So future efforts, this working group, even though the plan is basically finished, the group's committed to continue to work together at least semi-annually to evaluate the progress towards the implementation of these goals and strategies. Where possible, we need to look at doing additional research to answer any outstanding questions that may be out there in the Book Cliffs. And then, evaluate and revise the plan as needed every 5 years to get a better understanding of where we need to go. So I can report that, the group identified some priority tasks for this 2020 year. And these tasks and projects cover all the bases of all the previously identified issues. So there's some good proposals for water development that's been done. There's been some good coordination on grazing rotations and programs for this year. Vegetation projects are in the loop as well. So, and of course, the BYU Neonate study continues as well. So there's some good things going on this year to continue to look at things. There's been some good successes already with some of these projects that have been proposed and funded. And again, a lot of good coordination going on with all the parties out there. So I feel pretty encouraged about the direction this group's going. It's going to be a good collaborative effort to bring everybody along at the same time. And I look to see some improvements in the book cliffs hopefully over the next few years. So I think that's the end of my presentation. And at this point, if there's any other specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Miles, I have a couple of questions. What can we do on 197 stray horses? I mean, what are our options to eliminate them off the landscape?
So, horses can be a little bit tricky. Uena County did a horse gather in the Bonanza area this February. So I think there's options to work with Grand County. Most of these will be in Grand County to complete in a stray horse gather. So that, I think there's some good possibilities there. Funding is one of the challenges. It usually takes more funding than the horses generate when you sell them, but that's one of the challenges. But I think putting together all the players and come up with a good plan is doable. So that's one of the things that Slate Stewart from Sitla has been taking the lead on, and I know he's doing some coordination with Grand County on that. So that's something we're going to need to follow up on. But I think there's some real possibilities there, especially given that Uena County has already been successful with doing that in lower elevation areas earlier this year.
You mentioned there's some funding problems out there, and for the director, we just approved $3.2 million in habitat projects that will be multiplied to 26.2. How much of that was on the book cliffs? Do you have any idea, Miles, how much of that money was allocated to the book cliffs?
Man, I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't have those figures in front of me, to be honest with you, but we could look that up and get back with you.
Because with that kind of money, we generate basically that much money every year, and I'd like to see us put as much money as we can toward making a real difference on the book cliffs. Because we talked about this for years. It's great to see we've got a plan in place, but who's going to be in charge of the plan and responsible to make sure that all these action items are taken care of and happen? Is there any one person assigned to that, or several people?
So there are some subcommittees that were identified in the plan, and those folks are to help carry through those subcommittees, and then they're to report back to the overall group. And so we'll continue to meet as an overall group. We're hoping that the partnership will come along together. I've been the chairman of that group, so ultimately, I can try to make sure people are moving forward as best possible. But this is an advisory group, so there's not really a lot of teeth in terms of groups' power to dictate that anybody else does or implements anything. But I think everybody's invested into it. I hope that everybody will come along as we move forward.
Thank you. I just like to see somebody that's responsible, to make sure these things happen.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of, groups in the past and stuff like that, and they're all good, but I want to see, some results specifically book cliffs. So if there's any way we could implement somebody there to be directly in charge and just follow up on all these different items that if you need to hire somebody new or something like that, hopefully we could find the money to take care of that.
Sure. Yeah, I think we can look into that a little bit, see what we need to do. But for now, I will continue to try to work with the group and bring these things forward. But when it comes to authority of who really takes on horses and that, there's always been some questions with that. But I think there's a pretty good model in place with Grand County, so we'll continue to work on that.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
No questions. This is Randy. I just wanted to commend Miles and the entire group for what they've done. I know there's been a lot of effort put into this, and I really do appreciate it. And I definitely would support the idea of having somebody responsible to go through and make sure that all these recommendations, I think they're right in line with where they should be. But to follow through to make sure and that it happens. I know I've been in a lot of groups in my past life where you put a group together and they come up with really good things, but then just stagnant. But because nobody takes charge. So if we could have somebody that is accountable for this, it sure be nice. So I definitely support that if we could do that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Miles,
Miles,
this
this is Tony. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Donnie, this is Carl. You mentioned potentially more road kills if that road is extended down to I-70. Is that being talked about? Is that a possibility? How realistic is that?
You know, it comes up, and there was some discussion about that happening last fall. I don't know where they're at in the process right now. That's something we'll be following up on. You know, with the downturn in the economy and the downturn in oil and gas markets, that may affect the likelihood of that road being extended through. But it is something that's talked about. It's something we'll need to follow up on. But, you know, ultimately, I think someday you'll probably see that road extend through.
Carl, do you guys mind if I make a comment on that? This is Trish.
Go ahead, Trish.
So I've been fully embroiled in that battle for many years, and so I've met with and I've talked to SFW about this. I really think the sportsmen's groups really need to come together on this. I've met with SUA a few times. I don't think Grand County has any vested interest in that road. It really does nothing for Grand County. It does for Uinta County, and so I've met with and taken out county councilmen and women out there so that they can see the proposed path that road might run. Originally, they were talking Sago, which that fell flat on its face, but now they're discussing East Canyon. And honestly, when you get to the top of East Canyon, literally it's 19 miles from there to Douglas Pass as the crow flies. So I think hopefully the battle will continue. I really think it's a bad deal for wildlife in general. And it bothers me quite a bit that the DOT put that Sea Bridge Road in, put the underpasses and didn't put the fencing. It's like, what's the point? And I think that that's a place that we really need to stand as far as if they look at continuing that road, that they need to first finish the implementation of the first road and mitigating wildlife deaths. And so I just think it's something we really need to consider and know that I'm kind of on the ground down here really battling that. That's my opinion, but like I said.
Thanks, Tricia. Any other board members?
Yeah, I would like to add, Miles, I too would like to add, from a wildlife perspective, we really appreciate you taking this on. And if at any time, if you feel like a letter from the wildlife board to say like Slate Stewart or to county commissioners in Grand County, I think we'd be glad to be able to help in any way that we can. If it's in meetings to give our support in the removal of the horses, but wherever you feel that need is, I hate to have you feel like you're standing alone, that we're here to support you in that, and just please let us know where we can help.
Thank you. We'll definitely do that.
Yeah, Miles, this is Donnie. That's the same thing. That working group done a great job. And you can see that we've got too many mouths on that mountain. And until we can get that taken care of, we're going to be in trouble. The weather never does what it's supposed to. But anyway, we'll support you 100%, but we need to get some mouths off of that unit and get those animals healthy, and we'll all be happy. So
Okay.
we're here to help you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other board members? If not, Miles, we'd like to thank you and the committee that put that together, and appreciate your presentation. It's very informational for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Going forward, there will be no more presentations. All the presentations were made at the different racks and stuff like that. So, but as I mentioned before, there are lots of DWR personnel available to answer questions that you might have. That brings us up to our next agenda item, which is Upland Game and Turkey Guidebook. Mike, do you want to give us the overview of how that went through the racks?
Sure, Mr. Chair. There were comments about some specific things, and specific to the air rifle issues and some other things, but generally the racks were favorable for our recommendation.
Do you have the percentages of how that went, Mike, as far as
I don't have those at this point. Let me find those, and you can move on with the meeting, and I'll come back with those.
any questions from the board? Any questions from the rack chairs? If not, we'll go into the rack chair motion summaries. We'll start out with Justin Oliver.
Yes, in the Northern Rack, there was a motion made to accept the presentation as presented, and it passed 11-1. The one vote being against it was just concerned about also the air rifles and pellets. He was a falconer and just worried about lead and maybe not being as lethal on the turkeys as he had hoped. But it did pass 11-1.
Thanks, Justin. Brock?
The Central Region was active on this proposal, Byron.
See that.
There was a motion made to extend the current turkey plan for a year and recommend that the board reconvene the turkey working group or the group to write it. There was a concern about the split and how many turkeys are being harvested in the fall. That motion failed with a vote of 3-5. And then there was a motion to change the youth hunt to Monday to Sunday. And that motion did not get a second. Then there was a motion to make the first 2 weeks a youth hunt, and that motion didn't get a second. And then we finally moved to accept the turkey recommendations as presented, and that motion passed 7-1. And then there was a motion to keep the youth pheasant hunt on the day closest to October 13th instead of moving it later in the month, and that motion passed unanimously. And the reason for that motion was that the entire rack did not want to see the youth hunt on the second weekend of the deer hunt, which will happen some years if that recommendation is accepted. They wanted to keep that second weekend of the deer hunt not on the youth hunt. Then there was a motion to not allow air bows or air guns to take upland game because there are not PR payments on those guns, and that motion passed unanimously. And then there was a motion to accept the remainder of the division's recommendations, and that motion passed unanimously.
Thanks, Brock. Braden?
In the Southern Region, we had a motion to accept it as presented, and then that motion had an amendment made asking that they move to have the WMA closures are for only non-revenue generating and for the benefit of the general public. That motion failed on a vote of 3-4, and then the original motion passed unanimously. There just was some concern that with these hunts on the WMA closures that it wouldn't turn into a revenue generating or a private club. Discuss that, and I don't think there really is a fear of that.
Thank you. I have no idea whose phone call that was, but we'll go to Tricia.
We were fairly calm. It passed as presented unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brett?
This is Miles. Brett just texted me. Apparently he's having some audio problems, so I'll cover for him on this one. Not a lot of discussion in the Northeast region on this turkey item. Motion was to pass as presented by the division, and that was approved unanimously.
Okay. Director, do you have the public comments for us yet?
I do. Sorry about that. For this particular item, 50% of the public comments were in support, 16.67 were neutral, and 33.33% were opposed to the proposal.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members?
This is Carl. Most of them passed as presented, but could somebody give me an update of what the air rifle portion of the presentation was from the division?
Hi, this is Heather. Do you just want me to read over what was in the rack packet regarding the minimum requirements of the air guns?
I guess basically what it is the division's recommendation was to include air guns in that, not necessarily the specifics. Do I have that right?
I'm sorry, you cut out at the very end.
The division's recommendation was to allow air rifles.
Yes.
Is that the way that was? Okay.
For the fall turkey season and for rabbits and hares, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any more board discussion?
Help me remember, we got air rifles anywhere else allowed on any other hunts right now?
Not air guns the way that we have them described here. We don't. I know that for big game, there's the arrows and bolts that are allowed.
Okay, thank
you. This is Carl again. Does anybody, a lot of the discussion in Central Region centered around the Pittman Robinson money. Does there anybody have an update of where they might be? Last time when we had a conversation, they were in that process of getting registered. Anybody have an update?
If anyone else has another update, I'd love to hear that. The last that I heard when I spoke with the airgun manufacturer early this spring, they said that they're still in the process, and according to that big game recommendation, they have until December for the big game rule in order for them to be able to start paying PR.
Thank you.
Any more board discussion?
I would just, in some of the other board meetings where this has come up, the wildlife board has stood firm in feeling that we need to wait until there's Pittman Robertson money available or they're being taxed for that. And I feel like this would be a great tool, like Heather has presented in the presentation. But I feel like that if we don't stand our ground on this, that in a way we're just turning a shoulder to the issues of them not paying money into the Pittman Robertson.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other discussion?
Chairman Bateman, this is Marty Bushman.
Yes, sir.
To the extent the board may want to pass this, I just noticed something in the version of the draft that I had, and I'm not sure if it's in yours, but under the Upland game rule provisions where it allows air guns, which was largely taken from the turkey rules, it says that pellets can be used during the fall turkey season, and that was for upland game, which probably ought not to be there. I don't think we have, it just allows pellets with cottontail rabbits and snowshoe hares, and I don't think we necessarily want to limit the use of pellet guns to fall turkey season on those species. I think it was just a carryover that got copied over and probably ought not to be there.
Can you summarize that for us, then?
Yeah. So the use of a pellet gun with pellets or bolts for turkey hunting is limited, with pellets is limited to the fall turkey season only. And then there's a provision for using a pellet gun with cottontail rabbits and snowshoe hare. And it says that you can use pellets only during the fall turkey season, which I think was just an error in basically copying language over. And some of the turkey rule went up there inadvertently. So what I'd say is I think what was intended is under the upland game provisions that the use of a pellet in an air rifle is not limited to the fall turkey season. We just need to strike that off. The rule says during the fall turkey season.
So we need a motion to clean that up then, to change that. Marty?
Or just in your motion, recognize that change if the board's going to vote to approve this.
I'll call for a motion on Upland Game and Turkey Guidebook and rule recommendations.
All right, maybe this is Carl. Maybe we'll handle it two ways. I'll start with a motion that the board does not approve the use of air rifles for upland game until they are approved for Pittman Robinson, and they can come back and request.
I have a motion. Do I have a second to Carl's motion?
I will second that. This is Kevin.
I have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote with a roll call.
Mr. Chairman, could we have a little bit of discussion on that, just on this new motion?
Yes, go ahead, Wade.
So just a point of clarification. I mean, Heather has given us the latest update on the PR movement, but do we not already have something in place on the big game side that is still going to motivate and encourage these people to get to the PR classification and be recognized there? I recognize, Kevin, that we're being consistent, but do we not already have things in place that will accomplish what we want?
Marty, are you trying to? Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is Mike Fowlks. Let me just jump in for some clarification there. When we approved those air bows for big game, we did put a stipulation in there that they had, I think it was 2 years to get PR eligible, or that would sunset. So I believe that was how we dealt with it in the big game side of things. I can tell you, I've worked with Mitch King from the Air Gun Association, and they're trying very hard to get that issue resolved. It may not be that they're officially in the PR, but they are looking at figuring a way to do an excise tax that comes back to the agencies to help do conservation. So they're working on it. But we did offer up a 2-year on-ramp with the big game stuff to see if they could get that done.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, I guess that's kind of my thought as well, that if we could even be consistent with something like that, give them a 2-year window to become eligible, that would be consistent with what we've already done, and I would feel a lot more comfortable about that as opposed to just voting this down.
Thanks, Wade. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote. Kevin Albrecht.
Yes.
Randy Dirth.
Yes.
Carl Hurst.
Yes.
Wade Heaton.
No.
Brett Selman.
Yes.
Donnie Hunter. Donnie, you're muted. Push your mute button, Donnie.
Gotcha. No.
I have 5 yeses and 1 no. Motion passes 5-1. Okay, that takes us up to our next item on the agenda, item number 7, migratory upland game recommendations and Swan rule amendments.
Mr. Chair, this is the director again. Just to clarify, I believe you had a 4-2 vote. I believe there were 2 noes and 4 yeses.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Who is the second? No.
Donnie.
Donnie? Okay,
Donnie.
excuse me, Donnie. Thanks, Director, for that correction.
And then Byron, this is Carl. I'll make a motion that we approve the rest of the upland game recommendation as presented by the division.
Byron,
Okay,
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll call for a vote on the balance of the recommendation. Kevin Albrecht,
Yes.
Randy Dirth,
Yes.
Carl Hurst,
Yes.
Wade Heaton,
Yes.
Brett Selman,
Yes.
Donnie Hunter.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Now we'll move on to item number 7, migratory upland game recommendations and Swan rule amendments. Director, do you want to give us summarize the public comments on this item?
Certainly. For this one, and I'm hoping that you've all had a chance to go in and review those. Those were distributed to the board members, the written comments associated with these things as well. I just want to remind the public and the board that these were presented to the board and you have those in your packet. The support for this proposal was 66.67%. The opposed to this proposal was 16.67%, as was the neutral 16.67%. So pretty large support for this one.
Any questions from the board? Questions from the rack chairs? Hearing no discussion, that I'll call for a motion on this item.
Mr. Chairman, do we want to get the reports from the racks on this?
Yeah, excuse me, Wade, that's all right, we'll start with Justin Oliver on the rack motion summaries from the rack chairs.
Yes, in the Northern Rack, there was a motion made to accept as presented and it passed unanimously.
Brock McMillan.
There was a motion to accept the division's recommendations as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Braden Richmond.
The Southern region had a motion to accept as presented and it passed unanimously.
Tricia.
The Southeastern region had a proposal to accept the recommendations as presented and it passed unanimously.
Miles or Brett, whoever's available.
There was a motion in the Northeast region to just approve as presented by the division, and that also passed unanimously.
Thanks, Miles.
Thank you, Miles. Can the group hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Brett.
Okay. Mike, I think Mike's got me fixed up for the next item. Thank you. Thanks, Miles, for covering for me.
There any discussion from the board after hearing from the rack chairs? If not, I'll call for a motion on this item.
This is Randy. I'll make a motion we approve as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote. Roll call. Kevin Albrecht.
Yes.
Randy Dirth.
Yes.
Carl Hurst.
Yes.
Wade Heaton,
Yes.
Brett Selman,
Yes.
Donnie Hunter.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. We'll go on to our next item, which is the number 8, the AIS rule amendments. Director, do you want to again give us a summary of the public comments?
Yeah, sure. So for this unit, I think there was some. I don't think the public grasped what the issue was about. In the comments, 33% supported it, but 50% were neutral, and only 16.67% were opposed. So, not a lot of support, but I don't think people understood it.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members? Questions from the RAC chairs? We'll go ahead and start with the RAC motion of summaries. Justin Oliver.
Yes, so in the Northern RAC, we did have a little bit of a discussion on this. So we had a motion made to, I got to make sure I'm on the right one. Sorry, never mind. This motion passed unanimously. I'm sorry. Accepted as presented.
Thanks, Justin. Brock?
Yes, there was a motion to accept the division's recommendations as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Thank you. Braden?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. The Southern region had a motion to accept as presented, and it passed unanimously.
Thanks, Braden. Tricia?
The Southeastern region made a motion to approve the recommendations as presented, and it passed unanimously.
Brett? I thought we heard Brett come online. Is somebody from the Northeast region?
This is Brett. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Brett, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm working through this audio issue on my phone. The Northeast region passed it unanimously as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion on this item.
I would make a motion that we go with it presented by the division.
This is Randy. I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Kevin Albrecht?
Yes.
Randy Dirth?
Yes.
Carl Hurst?
Yes.
Wade Heaton?
Yes.
Brett Selman?
Yes.
Donnie Hunter? Donnie?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We'll go to the next item, number 9, walk-in access rule amendments. Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This had large support from the public comments. 66.67% supported the proposal, and 33.33% were neutral.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? I have just one question, Director. Is there any way to know how much money we generate from this program?
Certainly, we can get those for you. I don't have them off the top of my head, but Bryan or Lindy could probably compile those. We could get them to the board.
Yeah, if we could get those, that'd be nice. We'll go ahead and go with the racks from the rack chairs.
Would you like to start in the Northern?
Yes, Justin.
All right, so we did have discussion on this particular item. We have a member of our RAC that is an avid falconer, and he mentioned how he enjoyed being able to go to these WMAs and looking at the logbooks and being able to see if people had been using them and to get an idea so that he didn't have a bad interaction with his falcons with hunters. And so he made a motion that we accept this as presented with the caveat to provide user land use information to replace the sign box. Now and that passed unanimously. How that looks, I'm not exactly sure, but a way that people could see when it's being used and how, so that they could try to, for instance, the falconers could avoid conflict.
Thanks, Justin. Brock?
Yeah, the Central Region made a motion to accept the division's recommendations as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Braden?
Southern Region made a motion to accept as presented, and it passed unanimous.
Tricia?
The Southeastern Region made a motion to accept the proposal as presented, and it passed unanimously.
Brett? We lose Brett again? Anybody from the Northeast Region?
So I can talk a little bit about it. The Northeast Region voted to pass unanimously as presented by the division. There was some discussion about including non-consumptive wildlife watching in the future in the program. So that's it.
Thanks, Miles. Any further discussion from the board?
Mr. Chairman, just a question. This might be for Director Fowlks. What would it take logistically to accommodate that request from the Northern Region?
Refresh my memory. What was the issue?
They just wanted a way or a means that they could access user data so that basically they would know who was there, so there wouldn't be conflicts.
I think I'm going to defer to Bryan. He could probably answer some questions with regard to the walk-in access. Doesn't generate money either. It's based on us providing access, and so the benefit is the number of users for that too. But Bryan, can you speak to maybe both of those?
Yeah, I can. To start with the easier answer for the question about revenue generation, you're right. Walk-in access properties don't have fees for access. There's not permitting. There's not anything like that brings in any revenue source for the division. They're based off of two different types of money. Our fishing properties are basically paid for with funds generated by the division through licenses and other things. So we actually pay for those from our side. For the hunting properties, we get a federal grant each year we apply for that basically pays for the ones that we have involved in the hunting part of this program. So it's not a large expense each year from the division, thanks to the agreements we make with these landowners to participate. On as far as the other question goes, the concern that the falconer had was that he'd like to be able to go and ensure that other falconers could go to these particular properties and know if someone was bird hunting or doing other forms of hunting, so that they could just be aware that may or may not be a place that they want to deploy their birds and kind of know that they would have it to themselves at the time. So I asked a clarification question during that RAC meeting, and he seemed to be content that the division just provide general usage data for when hunts may be occurring that would use guns, rifles or shotguns, and that might be sufficient for them. And that would be kind of a tricky thing for us. We don't necessarily know, who's going to be where and when for any other type of hunt. And these really are private lands that we open up for specific hunts. So I think the best we might be able to do is just defer to the guidebooks, in that if there is a particular season open, that there may be someone there with a shotgun or a rifle. Now, the bright side about this request is that most of our walk-in access areas have one access point. There's a few that have two, but at each access point, there's a parking lot or a road strip, and you can see if there's a car in that spot, there's somebody on that landscape using it. And there's not a lot of these properties that have huge amounts of areas. Some of them are just in the few hundred acres. So you could actually, in theory, go to most of our walk-in access properties, see there's cars in the parking lot, and look out and probably even see people in the field. Now, that's not the case for all of them, but I think the vast majority of the properties we have enrolled, you could have a pretty good idea that people are out hunting just based on the time of year, what season is open, and if there's a car in that parking lot. But we're also not opposed to looking at more creative ways to help the public understand who's there and what activities they're participating in. So we're open to some options. I don't know that it needs to be in the rule for us to provide that type of service, though.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian, I have one more question for you. Could you give us, do you know how much money we pay out each year to these different landowners for this access?
I can tell you what we have allotted, and then if you want some more detail, I'd be happy to dig into my files later.
No, that's just approximately.
Yeah, the hunting side, we have allocated each year about $140,000 overall, and the fishing side is less than that. I think it's about 110 or 130, somewhere in there.
And then how do you match that with the participation rate as to how much that costs per, participation?
That's part of the creation of this rule revision, is that in past years, we kind of depended on the registration boxes to tell us who was there, how often properties got used, and we just weren't seeing a consistent enough usage for those registrations, those paper boxes, those paper sign-ins, for us to be confident that we know how many people are using it, and likewise know how much usage per dollar spent is being done. And so this revision hopefully will give us the tools that we can use more updated format for finding out what each usage is on each property. Similar to maybe how we use HIP numbers for waterfowl or migratory birds. We want to just use different methods to really know, is this a cost-effective program or is it not?
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve as presented.
Thanks, Wade. Do I have a second?
This is Brett. I'll second it.
Thanks, Brett. I have a motion and a second. I'll go ahead and call for a vote. Kevin Albrecht?
Yes.
Randy Dirth?
Yes.
Carl Hurst?
Yes.
Wade Heaton?
Yes.
Brett Selman?
Yes.
Donnie Hunter?
Yes.
Thank you. That takes us, number 10 on our agenda was postponed to a later date. So we'll skip that. We'll go to number 11, prohibited species variance request, Drew Dittmer. Native species.
Let me turn my light on real quick. Sorry, I'm feeling a little under the weather today. I'm going to try to power through this.
But I can give you a summary and then just answer any questions you might have. This is a request for a variance for the Great Basin Serpentarium and the owner and operator of the Great Basin Serpentarium to be able to take possession of reptiles and amphibians that the UDWR would otherwise consider prohibited species. This fills a need that we currently don't have. We do occasionally encounter scenarios where people own venomous snakes or crocodilians that they're not supposed to own. We don't really have a facility to put those when we confiscate them or take possession of them. Joey has a 3,000 square foot facility. After we get through this variance process, he's probably going to increase the size of that facility so that he can even take on more things as needed. Joey Muggleston is a faculty lecturer at UVU. He teaches herpetology, among other things, and biology courses. A very experienced herpetologist, both academically and as a hobbyist, keeping these things as pets. We issued a contract through purchasing and had an open application for the contract. And the contract was to fill two niches for us. One, our desert tortoise adoption program is another area where we don't really have a facility or the capacity to hold the tortoises that we encounter that we can't release back to the wild. So Joey Muggleston can help us with that issue. And then again, with the prohibited species. If there's anything else I can fill in, just let me know.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the rack chairs? If there are no questions, I'll call for a motion on this item.
This, Carl, sounds like something we should do. I'll make the motion that we approve as presented.
Thanks, Carl. We have a second. Randy?
Yep.
A second from Randy. Any discussion? Call for a vote. Kevin Albrecht?
Yes.
Randy Dirth?
Yes.
Carl Hurst?
Yes.
Wade Heaton?
Yes.
Brett Selman?
Yes.
Donnie Hunter?
Yes.
That's the end of our action items. Motion passed. Takes us down to other business. Is there any other business that anyone would like to discuss? I have one item. I think you've all received an email from Stacy about a possibility of our June 25th board work meeting agenda. I don't know if you all had an opportunity to respond back to that.
Yes, that's good that we're gonna maybe get that done. That needs to happen.
Mr. Chairman, I think there was another email just this morning saying that we had a quorum and that we had a place and that date was confirmed. So it looks like that's going to happen.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Mike. Stacy can probably give us more detail, but it looks like June 25th will be the day that we'll have that working meeting, and we will be gathering together in person. The board will, and select members of, or select folks who will contribute to the meeting. But we'll also have public access via the internet. So, Stacy, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think Director Fowlks, you covered it pretty clearly. It will appear a little different than, well, every meeting you've been in so far has appeared a little different, so that's nothing new. But like the director said, we will have to limit the number of physical people in the room. There will be spatial spaces between each of you. We won't require face masks by those in the meeting, but there will be a few other restrictions that we'll have to place. We will not be able to have any public sit in on the meeting with this. So as the director said, the YouTube feed will be live and the public will be able to watch that way. It is a work session, which means there are no action items on the agenda. So everything will be informational. You will not be taking any action on any of the items. So that is one of the reasons that we are allowed to have the public attend electronically and not in the room. We are prepping an agenda for it right now. I'll get that out to you as soon as I can for your input. We are planning on a full day. I know before we had said just a morning meeting. I think with the length of the agenda so far, it's going to be a 9 to 4 meeting. So if you plan on just staying the whole day for that, and we'll do the best we can in the situation that we're in. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any of those.
Stacy, this is Carl. We postponed an item on the agenda today. Is this a type of meeting that we could handle that in? You need to, because there's a time sensitive on that item, do we need to schedule something else for that?
That's a good question. We would not handle it during the work session. It's my understanding that there's a few steps that need to take place before we can bring it back to the board. We do want to bring it back in a situation that would allow you guys to have an executive session. And that's a little more complicated when we do it electronically. And you are correct, it is time sensitive. So you will be seeing an email from me within probably the next week asking for at least a quorum of 4 board members to be able to participate in that stipulation hearing. I wish I could give you more detail than that, but there's just a lot of things that still have to be worked out on our end for that.
Thank you.
Stacy, just one other question on agenda. I assume we're going to pull the items we had on the prior agenda and then just add a few more. We haven't removed any from that original agenda, have we?
No, we haven't removed any from what you've requested. We have added a few, and you'll be seeing that as that comes back out. But it's my intent to still cover the same things that the board had requested to cover back in March before we postpone that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Stacy, I'd like to thank you for getting that, put that back together for us. And, by the 25th of June, with what's going on, that's really a lot of work to make that happen for us. So that covers, unless anybody has any other business. I don't know, Stacy, if you want to mention anything about WAFA coming up in July, what that might entail with the division or.
Well, WAFA 2 is going to look a little bit different this year. So unfortunately, it was our year to host, and we were pretty excited to showcase our state, and that has been postponed. We have now been asked to host in 2022, which is the 100th anniversary of WAFWA. So that'll be fun. So we are still going to do it. We're just going to do it in 2 years. WAFWA for this year will be virtual. So I would imagine during the June 25th meeting, we'll have some more information on how that impacts the wildlife board members and how you'll still be able to participate in committees and those types of things. So we'll get some more information to you on that. But put a pin in all of our party plans until 2022, and then we'll show the rest of the country what the state of Utah can do.
So Stacy, Mr. Chairman, quick question on that. Stacy, because it's virtual, would it be available to all of us as opposed to just the 2 that had originally signed up?
Yes, we would allow all 7 board members to attend. There's still a fee, there's still a registration, there's still some stuff like that. But yes, if all 7 board members wanted to participate this year, we would fully support that.
Okay, thanks.
This is Mike again. That's the plus of going to a virtual, is that we'll have many more folks participating in those meetings that couldn't otherwise physically travel to that. So it'll be great for the board members to be able to jump on and see what goes on there, as opposed to the 2 that were going to travel to that. So Byron will still be the voting member for us on that, but you'll all be able to participate.
And that'll be on Thursday, July 9th. Stacy, I think that's the date that they had those meetings scheduled for the commissioner.
That's the date as of right now for the commissioners meeting, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the board?
Chairman Bateman, this is Justin Shannon. I've got one thing, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Justin.
You asked earlier about projects on the Book Cliffs. I got with our Habitat folks during the meeting, and we're going to be doing 6 habitat projects on the Book Cliffs at the tune of just over $1 million, $1,072,000. So just wanted you to have that information.
Well, that's great news, Justin. Thank you. We just need to do as much as we can out there on the book cliffs. And like I mentioned earlier, I always think that we need somebody that's in charge, which is the lead, which is going to push those kind of projects and stuff to, to make them happen and come to fruition. So something you might want to look into, somebody we could appoint to be the man in charge out there. With that, is there any other comments, questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
I have a second.
I can second that, Byron.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call. Kevin Albrecht.
Yes.
Randy Dirth.
Yes.
Carl Hurst.
Yes.
Wade Heaton.
Yes.
Brett Selman.
Yes.
Donnie Hunter.
Yes.
Motion passes. We stand adjourned until our next meeting on June 25th. Thank you all for your time. Thank you. We'll see you back in end of the month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.